Roopa, can I come to you and can we talk about the good children?
Sure.
Strapline, leaving home is one thing, surviving is another. I'm always fascinated in the seeds that are planted in an author's mind that then become the novels. So what was the seed that meant you were going to spend 2 years with this story?
Yeah, this was a big book for me. It took up a lot of my life, actually. I was up, I have 4 young children, 8 and under, so I write 5 to 8 every morning. So
I'd also point out, not just 4 young children, 8 and under, but also a full-time day job and visiting lecturerships all over Europe.
So that's what I write. And it's funny, I find the act of writing is inspiring in itself, and it's always when I'm in the middle of writing one thing that another story starts taking me over. I was actually writing quite a different story when I started The Good Children, when the seeds, as you say, came to me. I was actually writing a story about an isolated community. And then it was actually 3 different things that happened. One was that my 7-year-old called me a monster because I asked him to do his homework. The second thing was I came across, just quite by accident, a copy of Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf in my local library. And I picked it up and I was fascinated by the story of the monstrous mother and the child she created. And the third thing that happened was that for my work on isolation in this isolated community, I was looking at the moral compass of isolation and started studying the 1960s psychological experiments in the States, the Milgram experiment, which opens this book, and Stanford prison experiment. And all these ideas sort of came together. And I found myself thinking, do good children, are good people the ones who do what they're told? And I put aside the work on isolation I was writing, and I wrote on a blank piece of paper, obedience, in big capital letters, and I wrote that line underneath it, are good children the ones who do what they're told? And that was the seed for this novel. I wanted to write about how children could be manipulated and changed over the generations by the idea of obedience to authority, to what their expectations, and also how they would be the game changers, how they would break out of it. Because I'm writing in this story about the game-changing generation, the rule breakers, the ones who started off being kind of crowded into a particular box, a particular way of living. They started off in the 50s in Pakistan, but how they are the ones who eventually do something completely different. And also living with the consequences of those decisions. What do you give up when you pursue your passion? When you break the rules? What do you lose along the way? This passage is written from the point of view of Solomon, and so it is from a male voice, so just to let you know, I'm reading from a male perspective, and also he's quite young, he's 18 here, about to go to college, so if you will imagine me as an 18-year-old boy, that would actually help a little bit in this reading. It's at his sister's wedding. There was a rustling of silk behind me, and it took me a moment to realise that my mother was standing there. She put her hand on my shoulder, a spidery claw, with nails filed and polished to drips of bright blood. Her palm was so cold, it felt that it might sink through my flesh, like a knife through warm butter. I sensed that people were watching her as she stood with her oldest child and watched her others dancing, and that was her intention, for them to see her as the loving mother of happy children, for everyone in the room to be aware of how good a mother she was, by the measure of our apparent happiness, by the measurable inch width of our smiles. She seemed pleased to be one and run over, and asked me, with flirtatious and girlish charm, that she had poured over the guests like syrup from a pot, if I was going to dance. She asked it in Punjabi, with calculation, as though aware that not everyone in the room would speak English as fluently as we did. Naam, I said, replying in Punjabi automatically before I realised what I was doing. I switched back to English. Speaking Punjabi at the table is to get our knuckles rapped or the back of our heads smacked, unless we were speaking to a servant. No, Mummy, I don't dance. Go on, she said girlishly, adding with a steel tone. Dance with your little friends. I looked at her with confusion. Apart from Lana and Jakey, none of the children were older than 11 or 12. She couldn't possibly think that I was one of them. I was older than they, the daughter who had just been passed off to a doctor in marriage. Go play, she said, smiling with her mouth, but not allowing it to touch her eyes, so they wouldn't wrinkle. wire was twisted into her words, and I wondered what I could have possibly done to upset her. She smiled wider, as though showing me how, and with the whiteness of her teeth I realised what it was. I hadn't been smiling, and she had felt shown up by this, that I had been sour and staring from the edges, instead of joining in. I smiled back, awkwardly, like a cartoon, and when I reached the acceptable inch width, she breathed out and relaxed.
Romesh, can we come to you and this fantastic sort of, it's interlinked stories really you've told. Is that the way you perceived it? Is that what you set out to do?
Is that what I set out to do? I don't know. But it is a set of interlinked stories. I guess I started out wanting to write just a short story, really, or a couple of short stories. And I wanted to do that before I started writing the next novel, which I'm doing now. And it kind of slipped in, really. And one story led to another, and then I could see that actually I just liked the company of this guy who's telling the stories. So I sort of sat with him. Vasanta. So I sat with him a little longer, and so we had a number of stories, and then I began to see that this could be either a set of stories or a novel, and that maybe it doesn't matter too much which it is. So Vasanta is a van driver, and one of the starting points for the story and the book is the fact that when the war was over in 2009, it became easier and more possible for people to travel north. People from the south to go north to Jaffna, to see Jaffna. And I did go to Jaffna for the first time only after the end of the war. Though Jaffna has been in my mind a lot because my mother used to talk quite a lot about Jaffna. She was not from Jaffna, but she did in her childhood live there. So Vasanta goes to Jaffna a couple of times, and that was really the beginning of the story. I wanted to see the place through his eyes. Every time I drive across the causeway to Jaffna, I feel I'm entering another country. The lagoon is as big as a sea. The sky touches it at the edge on the left and on the right, and the wind makes ripples look like waves. The fellows at the checkpoint know me so well now that they don't even look at my ID. They crack a couple of jokes about the state of my van and laugh their heads off. I tell them it's a Japanese van. In 1945, that Japan was a dump. Nobody thought the Japanese could make even a cup of tea anymore. But now, Toyota is the biggest car company in the world. It's a funny business, I tell them. No one knows who will have the last laugh. Look at Germany. Same thing. German tourists are rolling in it now. That chancellor is the boss of Europe. It makes you wonder about this business of defeat and victory. Today, I'm the van man for 2 Hollanders and Mrs. Gunesekera. I'll get some more oddballs in here, but this is the oddest cheer in a while. My job is to drive the Jaffna for 1 night only. Straight there, straight back. By the end of the trip, we'll spend more hours on the road. Mrs. Gunesekera from the New Heritage Agency is in charge. You had petrol, no? She asked the moment she got it. She's like the deputy governor's wife. When I used to work at the Coconut Corporation, same thing. If I got my best job, I used to drive her all around Colombo. It was a good job, but she was another madcap. I prefer being behind the wheel, going somewhere than behind a desk. That's why I started this business with the van the moment I retired.
Xiaolu's latest work is called I Am China. And what was the seed of the idea? What was the germ that became this fantastic book?
I'm always interested in, I think, the alienation and the dislocation of each individual. For example, these 3 characters in this novel, but they live in different space and time, and they don't meet at all. So one is a Scottish girl, end up in London, who's actually English, translating all the documents, letters and diaries and love letters from China. She's totally actually living in another space and time, although she lives in North London. And the second character is this punk musician who is in exile in Europe, wandering around the whole Europe trying to find his own political identity, which is a really difficult one for a political punk in the West. And then the third character is this Chinese woman poet who's drifting around in America, from East Coast to the West Coast, on the road, like a beat poet, but without beat atmosphere, who eventually return to China and then come back to London again. So those people in different time and space, and I try to find, kind of compose a kind of orchestra or a kind of a symphony, bigger one, in the different places on this globe. And I think they are me, but they shouldn't be me. They're a different person trying to find their different lifestyle. One is very political one is totally apolitical one, another one is a sexual, sensual one. So I'm going to read little two paragraphs from the very end. The punk musician wrote a manifesto, which for me, the reason I published no, because I want to write a long manifesto. And the trick is I put underneath, in the very, very end of the book, and then so the publisher wasn't realizing it. And I remember I was really in love with this 20 pages of War and Peace, the epilogue, the after the story, the whole philosophical talk. 20 pages from Tolstoy. In China, that's the only thing we're going to study when we university. So that was my dream. And instead I wrote something like 4 pages, so that's it. This little manifesto, I just want to read two sections. Those artists exiled in the West, because they were analyzing the relationship between the state and individual. I know it's not a big deal here. You are relatively in a very democratic country. But in China, or in North Korea, or in Iran. And this question would bother you all the time if you're an artist, because you will be in prison or out of prison. And perhaps that explains the reason I write in English nowadays. So, this punk musician wrote these two paragraphs. Of course, there's many paragraphs in front of it. Power and the myth. Now, the novel is called I'm China. I just want to say that China should be replaced by any country, if you like. Japan, Germany, especially America, Australia, Britain, especially, or any powerful country. So I am American, I am German, I am Japan. It's about power of state and how you fit in as a citizen, so-called citizen, but we are not. Power and the myth. The state needs myth. The state creates a mythical vision for the people to live through and live for. That's so true of China. China is a great myth maker, and the citizens dream that myth. Next paragraph. Guns and power. Why does China need a myth? Why does America need a myth? Is it not enough that the state has guns? If there are guns, can the guns be used to control the people? As Mao said, power flows out of the barrier of a gun. Isn't that it? Gun equals to power. No, of course not. The rule of gun is not the greatest power. There are only so many bullets, and people will always resist. And if they are all shot, there will be no people to go rise, to build cars, and to create luxury for the rich. So, and anyway, you need a myth to control the soldiers who fire those bullets. They have to believe in their myth of being great soldiers who pull the trigger. So the state needs a myth. With a great myth, the people control themselves. And China's myth used to be that of Tianzi, the emperors. Now, it's a myth of the democratic middle class life, of consuming this and that in the sphere of commercial freedom.